Okay, so are you ready to dive into a world that's kind of like something out of a movie? We're talking global cartel gold smuggling.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like an action thriller, doesn't it? But the thing is, this is actually happening, and it's a huge problem.
It really is. We hear so much about cartels and drug trafficking, but gold smuggling, it's becoming their new favorite thing, it seems. Why is that?
Well, I think it's the fact that it's low risk and high reward, and it's happening all over the world. It's a global operation.
Yeah. So for anyone listening who's picturing, like those old-timey gold mines and just mountains of cash,
Yeah.
well, you're not far off. But what I'm really curious about is how does it actually work? Like, where does this whole process even begin?
Well, it all starts in South America. They have these massive illegal gold mines that are literally carved out of the rainforest, and it's leaving behind this devastating environmental footprint.
Wow.
It's really sad, actually. And these operations are often controlled by cartels who exploit these miners who are often very desperate. They pay them almost nothing while they're making huge profits.
So wait, so the gold that like I might see in a jewelry store or something, that could be coming from these illegal mines. How is that even possible?
Yeah, it's really about creating this smokescreen. Smugglers are very clever. They're incredibly clever at disguising the gold. You can imagine gold bars coated in wax, and they're hidden inside furniture or even shipments of food.
Food shipments. Wow, I never would have thought of that. That's crazy. So, okay, they've got the gold hidden, but how do they actually get it out of South America? They can't just like walk through customs with a suitcase full of gold bars, right?
You're exactly right. It's not that easy. That's where the journey gets even more interesting, I guess you could say. The gold then makes its way to Africa.
Africa, okay.
Yeah, Africa acts as a sort of laundering hub for all this illegal gold. Countries like Ghana and Mali and the Democratic Republic of Congo, they become key players not because of their own gold mines, but because they have these very porous borders, and unfortunately, sometimes they have corrupt officials.
Right. So it's like a relay race almost.
Yeah.
The gold's going through all these different countries to kind of obscure its origin.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like they're passing the baton. And what the smugglers will do is they'll mix that illegally mined gold from South America with gold that was legally mined in Africa.
Oh, sneaky.
Yeah. And that creates this very complex paper trail. It makes it almost impossible to trace where the gold originally came from. It's like a giant shell game on a global scale.
Wow. That's incredible. So they've disguised the gold, they've mixed it with legal gold to throw the authorities off the scent. But where does it finally end up? Who's buying all this smuggled gold?
The final destination is Asia. Dubai and India are the main players in this part of the game. Dubai has all these free trade zones, and that means there are areas with much more relaxed regulations.
Okay.
That makes it the perfect place to clean the gold. Basically make it look legitimate, erase its history.
So these free trade zones, are they kind of like loopholes that smugglers can exploit?
Yeah, you could definitely say that. It's a way to move goods around with very minimal oversight.
Right.
And then you have India, which has this just insatiable demand for gold. So it's the final link in the chain. It connects this whole illicit trade to this huge consumer market.
Wow. So it's amazing when you think about it. This whole operation, it spans 3 continents.
Yeah.
You have this complex web of smugglers and corrupt officials, and then you have everyday people who are unknowingly buying this smuggled gold.
It really is. And we've only just scratched the surface here. The tactics that cartels use to evade detection, they're evolving constantly. And that makes this a really challenging issue to address.
So we've followed this gold from these kind of hidden mines in South America through that laundering process in Africa and finally to the markets in Asia. It's a wild journey for sure. It's easy to get caught up in the how of it all,
Yeah.
like the clever tactics and secret routes. But what I'm really wondering is what's the impact of all this? Like, why should we as consumers even care about this?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? The truth is this whole illicit gold trade has some really far-reaching consequences, and they're not good. We're talking about economic losses and environmental devastation, and there's a big human cost, too. It's all connected in this really complex web of consequences.
Yeah. Okay. So let's break that down a little bit. Let's start with the economic impact.
Yeah.
So what actually happens to the countries where this gold is being illegally mined?
Well, imagine you're a country like Venezuela. They're very rich in natural resources like gold, But then imagine billions of dollars worth of that gold is just being taken from your land every year. No taxes paid, no regulations followed, and really no benefit to the people who live there. That's the reality for a lot of these South American countries that are dealing with this illegal mining.
Wow, billions of dollars. That's a huge loss for those economies.
Oh, absolutely. Venezuela, for example, they lose an estimated $2.5 billion every year because of illegal gold mining. That's money that could be used for schools or hospitals or infrastructure, all the things that help a country thrive. But instead, it's going into the pockets of criminals. It's fueling all this corruption.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy then. The country loses valuable resources, and then the profits end up funding all this illegal activity. It's this vicious cycle. But what about the countries where the gold actually ends up? What kind of impact does it have on them?
That's the other side of this whole thing, right? While the destination, countries like India, they might benefit from lower gold prices, there's this dark side to that. The influx of all this illegal gold fuels more criminal activity, money laundering, tax evasion, and all of that undermines the formal economy. It weakens the rule of law.
So it's not just about the money. It's about this kind of erosion of trust and stability within these economies.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the environmental impact, which is maybe the most visible and honestly kind of heartbreaking consequence of all of this. You see those images of rainforests that have just been completely ravaged and rivers poisoned with mercury and these entire ecosystems destroyed. That's the true cost of this illegal gold mining.
Yeah, it's a tragedy, and it's happening on such a massive scale. I was reading about the use of mercury in illegal gold mining, and
Yeah.
it's terrifying. Mercury is incredibly toxic.
Oh, it's really bad. It contaminates water sources, soil, the air, and it accumulates in the food chain. That poses serious health risks to people and to wildlife, and often it's the most vulnerable communities that are bearing the brunt of all this destruction.
Right, you're talking about the indigenous populations who really rely on the land for their survival.
Exactly. Their whole way of life is being disrupted, their health is being compromised, their ancestral lands are being exploited for profit. It's a stark reminder that the choices that we make as consumers have these consequences that reach so much farther than we realize.
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think. Like, is that beautiful gold necklace really worth all the pain and destruction that it might represent? But there must be people working to stop this, right? There must be some solutions, some efforts to combat this illegal trade.
Oh, there absolutely are. And that's what gives me hope. The first step is awareness, which is what we're doing here today. But awareness without action is like a car without an engine. It's not going to get us anywhere.
So let's talk about action. What are some of the strategies that are actually being put in place to try to disrupt these smuggling networks and protect the people and the environments that are being harmed?
Well, stricter regulations are a really important starting point. Governments in both the source countries and the destination countries, they need to really tighten those controls on gold imports and exports. And that means requiring more documentation, conducting audits of these refineries and traders, and really closing those loopholes that allow the illegal gold to slip through.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about making it much harder to hide where that gold is coming from, increasing transparency and accountability across the whole supply chain.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where international cooperation is really important too. Agencies like Interpol and the Financial Action Task Force, they're playing a big role in coordinating these cross-border investigations and sharing intelligence and really trying to disrupt those criminal networks.
Right. It's a global problem that requires a global response. It's
Mhm.
encouraging to hear that there is some collaboration happening on that level. But what about the technology side of things? Can technology play a role in combating this trade at all?
Absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting. Imagine being able to track a piece of gold from the mine where it was extracted all the way to the jewelry store where it's sold, with each step of the journey recorded and verified. That's the potential of blockchain technology.
Oh, wow. So blockchain would create this kind of digital trail that can't be erased or manipulated, making it much harder for smugglers to lie about where that gold came from.
Exactly. It's like a digital fingerprint that exposes the true journey of that gold, making it impossible for illegal gold to be passed off as ethically sourced.
That's incredible. It sounds like blockchain could be a real game changer in this fight against gold smuggling. But what about the people on the ground? The people who are most directly affected by illegal mining? Are there any efforts to help them and offer alternatives?
Yeah, for sure. Engaging with local communities is so important in tackling this issue at its source. Empowering them to resist illegal mining, to report suspicious activity, and to participate in sustainable development projects, these are all vital steps.
So it's about offering them another way, giving them a way to make a living without having to resort to these dangerous and destructive practices.
Exactly. Providing training, resources, and opportunities for alternative livelihoods, things like sustainable agriculture or ecotourism that can help break that cycle of poverty and the dependence on illegal mining.
It sounds like a multifaceted approach is really key here. Stricter regulations, international collaboration, cutting-edge technology, and then these really grassroots efforts all have to work together to create a more ethical and sustainable gold industry.
Yeah, it really does take a village. And while the fight's far from over, the growing awareness and the efforts being made, it offers a glimmer of hope. We're seeing positive changes, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by how big this problem is, but knowing that there are people out there who are actively working to address it is really encouraging. But we can't forget that we as consumers, we're part of this too. Our choices matter.
Oh, absolutely. The responsibility really lies with each of us to make informed decisions and to demand transparency from the businesses that we choose to support.
So we've really gone deep, haven't we? We've uncovered this whole world of gold smuggling and traced its impact and explored the solutions that people are working on to try to combat it. But now I think it's time to kind of turn the spotlight inward a little bit, you know, because as consumers, we're not just watching this happen, we're actually part of it. Our demand for gold is what fuels this whole industry, both the legal side and the illegal side.
That's a really important point. It is really easy to feel disconnected from where the things we buy actually come from, especially something like gold. I mean, it has such a long and complicated journey from the mine to the market.
Exactly. And as we've learned, that beautiful gold necklace or that ring that you love, it could have this hidden cost, you know? Environmental destruction, exploited miners, and economies that are being robbed of their resources. So the question is, what can we do about it? How can we make sure that our love for gold isn't accidentally contributing to all this, the dark side of the industry?
Well, like we've been talking about today, it starts with awareness. But awareness on its own, without action, it's not enough. It's like a car without an engine, you know? It's not going to get us very far.
So let's talk about action. What are some things that we can actually do as consumers to make better choices when it comes to buying gold?
I think the first thing is just don't be afraid to ask questions. When you're buying gold jewelry, ask about where it came from. Where was the gold mined? How is it processed? Are there any certifications that guarantee that it was sourced ethically?
So it's about being a more conscious consumer, right? Not
Yeah.
just taking things at face value, but really digging a little deeper and demanding that transparency from the businesses that we're supporting.
Right, exactly. And you can look for jewelers and retailers who are very clear about the fact that they prioritize ethical sourcing. There are certifications out there like Fair Trade Gold and Fair Mined Gold, and these ensure that the mining practices are responsible, that workers are treated fairly, and that the environment is protected.
So we're talking about really voting with our wallets, supporting those businesses that are aligned with our values. But what about the gold that we already own? Is there anything that we can do with that?
For sure. You can explore alternatives to newly mined gold.
Mm.
Vintage jewelry or recycled gold jewelry. Not only is it stylish, but it's also a more sustainable option. It reduces the demand for newly mined gold, which then lessens the pressure on those areas where illegal mining is happening.
Right, so it's like giving old gold a new life. It reduces our overall footprint. But thinking beyond our own purchases, how can we spread the word? How can we encourage other people to make more ethical choices too?
I think just talking about it is really important. Don't underestimate the power of conversations. Talk to your friends and family about what you've learned, share information about ethical sourcing and the impact of illegal gold mining. The more people who know about this issue, the more we can all demand change together.
It's about creating that ripple effect, making those waves. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, let's leave our listeners with one final thought. We've learned that gold, which is this symbol of beauty and value, can also have a really dark side.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be that way. We have the power to choose a different path, a path that's better for everyone.
Yeah. Gold is so powerful. It symbolizes beauty and wealth and prosperity. Shouldn't we be working to make sure that its journey from the mine to the market reflects those same values?
Mhm.
Responsibility, fairness, sustainability. The next time you see a piece of gold jewelry, think about the story behind it, where it came from, how it got there. Ask yourself, what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind?
That's a really powerful question, and it's one that we all need to answer. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of gold smuggling. We hope this has been eye-opening for you and maybe sparked some important conversations, and we hope it inspires you to make more conscious choices going forward. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.